kind of the first step in a long, hopefully many more opportunities to keep this conversation going. You will hear from a lot of different speakers covering topics like open data, big data, green hackathons, digitalization of clean tech, completely revolutionizing the potential for energy efficiency, renewable energy. The topic theme is around energy. Energy is important for all of us. Everything we do pretty much every day has some kind of impact or is provided by, is made possible by energy, I would say. From the World Bank's perspective, we are obviously very excited about renewable energy and energy efficiency. Many mayors and municipality officers and national policymakers and members of society are as well. And I think the big question we really haven't figured out yet is if energy efficiency has this amazing potential, it's the cheapest, it's the best, it's the fastest way to generate more energy, why isn't it happening? A lot of the speakers will touch upon this topic, particularly looking at clean technology and how the digitalization of clean technology makes this easier and faster and less risk, takes down the risk. I will let Oriol, who is moderating the panel and also introducing the topic, take over. Before, I would just like to flag something. On page 50 of this nice little booklet, I'm sending around a survey around energy data. The World Bank is trying to make better sense of how people, startups, companies, municipalities are using energy data. So if you know anyone who is working on energy and is interested in data, please send them this link or this little QR and help us fill the survey. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I've been told to, we all going to introduce ourselves. Let me get this right. That's the one. So my name is Oriol Pasqual, and I've been working as a business developer in the field of clean technologies for the last 15 years. And that will summarize a little bit what is it that I do. But something that I would like to introduce today is this idea of clean web, what we see, what's happening in the areas of clean technologies and how digitalization is coming to clean tech and the advantages that this is bringing. And this is something that further on is going to be complemented with some of the people participating in the panel. All of you are familiar with the concept of clean technology. Basically, what we've been trying for the last 25, 30 years is to make a more efficient use of resources and to be able to even produce clean resources. And we are doing that through clean technologies. These clean technologies, what they allow us is to deliver certain functionality with lower inputs or more efficiently. And examples will be in the areas of renewable energy, mobility, or water-related technologies. This is great, and we advance a lot in this area, but it's also true that clean technology has, or clean tech has certain limitations. First and foremost, it's technology-based, but the way we understand clean tech, it's mainly about hardware. We are talking about hardware development. As a consequence, this is capital intensive. In order to develop new clean technologies, we need to put in lots of money, and the development times are huge, are very long. We may develop an innovative technology today that it's going to take some 20, 25 years to reach the market. In that regard, it's very risk adverse, or it's very risky from a business perspective. And what we saw also is that clean tech or clean technology solutions are very much depending on government decisions. And that is a problem. We saw this in several countries, but for instance, here in Spain, we saw the rise and fall of renewable energy. It depends, it's a government who decides if I am pro-renewable energy or I decide to switch off and then destroy an entire industry. That is a pity, but what we see is that, the challenges in clean technologies today are not fundamentally about technology, are not fundamentally about technological solutions. The challenges are about complex financing schemes. You may need complex and you may require lots of money to bring the solutions to the market, and the incentives are very blurred. A second element or second challenge is a failure to communicate to consumers. On B2B operations, that's fine, but for the ones that we spent some years in the field of sustainability, we've been trying to educate consumers, and we believe that consumers understand what a kilowatt hour means, and that's not the case. The scientific language does not apply to a regular consumer. And finally, the challenge is about poor sales channels. How do we bring these technologies to the market in an efficient way? And luckily, what we see is that digitalization is bringing lots of opportunities in green. Digitalization had disrupted industries, several industries, and now disrupting clean tech. And this is what we call the clean web, which will be a subcategory of clean tech, and is using ICT at the core in order to bring solutions. And very briefly, this is a framework that frames where clean web stands. So basically, we're talking about the intersection of three existing, well-mature industries. Clean technology is about delivering certain functionality using less resources. The Internet of Things, which is about gathering data, and it's also about deploying a network of sensors and building distributed network structures. And collaborative consumption that is characterized by peer-to-peer interactions, but it's also very interesting because it's characterized by restructuring existing markets. So this is what, for instance, Airbnb is doing for the hospitality market. Clean web sits right in the middle. Clean web is taking characteristics of all these three industries in order to develop business solutions that help us make a more efficient use of resources. This is not a term that we invented. Actually, Sonny Paul wrote an article 2 years ago at the MIT Technology Review, and he mentioned clean web for the first time. And then it's a group of passionate people that we've been digging in, being frustrated with clean tech and the limitations. We've been digging in and trying to find out what the opportunities are. But in short, clean web can be defined as ICT for resource efficiency. 4 main characteristics. ICT is at the core of the solution. The main aim or the value proposition of the solution is to make a more efficient use of resources, so it's resource focus. We are talking about companies, so they have a clear business model and they are highly scalable. One characteristic is that clean web solutions help to create value beyond the environmental dimension. That will be the typical perspective from environmental community. It creates value for the environment, it creates value for the final users, and it creates value for the market. And it takes the advantages of the digital solution, so agile development, quick development times, and very fast iterations, is capital light, is low risk, and highly scalable. And a good example will be later on, for instance, you can have hackathons, and over a weekend, you can have first stages of clean web solutions. Just to close and to leave the floor to the rest of my colleagues, we've been identifying business models. Something nice about clean web is that lots of solutions have been invented, and as we heard yesterday from Estebel Mirai, I will invite people to steal and to copy, not just copy-paste models, but copy and morph. So take models and adapt them to the context. If you want to know a little more about these models, because there's no time today, we have an open source database of over 220 clean web companies online. You are free to browse and to add your examples. And you have a detailed description of these business models in this PDF that is free to download. So thank you very much, and I'll leave the floor to Kat.
should I stand up? Or?
Yeah. I'll take your seat, actually.
Oh,
We don't have chairs for
right.
everyone.
Okay, great. Sorry.
We are missing a chair, so
Okay. Great, so my mic's on. Hi, everyone. My name is Kat. I have several hats. I am an open data enthusiast. I advise the French Chief Data Officer in matters regarding open data. I direct also the Open Data Institute's outpost in Paris. Actually, it's called a node, but I like outpost because it makes open data seem kind of like the wild, wild west. And then there's my favorite hat, which is the co-founder and CEO of Paris-based innovation agency called 5x5. So really quickly, I'm here to talk to you about open data for resource efficiency. Speaking of openness, I want to start about how I actually walked into open data, which is here. I used to direct the Canadian section of an international press freedom watchdog called Reporters Without Borders. So what does that have to do with innovation? Not much, really, but you'll notice under the little logo it says for freedom of information. So I walked into open data from a transparency angle. It's what interested me the most by far. And up to maybe 2011, it was my big crusade. And then I remember talking to a mayor, actually, who about my huge crusade for transparency at Reporters Without Borders. And she takes out her phone, and she shows me a video of a plenary session. It must have been 10 p.m. in the evening on the video. People are really tired. Apparently, it's a session where citizens at any time can just ask questions, as many questions as they want. And she showed the video, and people were tired. And they were really bored, and some people were checking their Facebook, and they really looked like they just all wanted to leave. And she's like, well, you want transparency? That's transparency. And she said this thing which I thought was really hilarious at the time. She said, transparency is like a peep show, because you can look and you can't touch. And as people who are part of a democracy, I think we need to be a little bit more ambitious for that. And so that's how I got into open data. So what is open data, anyway? Let's start with a sort of textbook definition. Open data is data that can be used, freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, subject only at most to the requirement to attribute and share alike. But beyond that, why would you open data anyway, right? So let's, the list is quite long. I have 8 minutes, so I'm going to sort of give you my top reasons related to the topic. So the first one is accountability. This is a project which I quite like called Open Spending, from where does my money go? So what it does is that it basically shows data on public spending from your governments. Basically, as a taxpayer, based on how much you make, how much taxes are you paying, and what is it going to? So thanks to open data, you can see things that and for every 0.14 cents that go into the environment, if you live in the UK, you have 4 pounds that go into defense. So interesting to start a few discussions. Also for better decision making, here is quite a popular ad. It was a job posting that came out in 2011, right when open data started getting really interesting. So I'm gonna have you look at that for a little while, and you may or may not guess what job posting it was for, but what company, but you may not have guessed that it's for Nike. That looks like maybe a government job posting, an international organization. Now, why is Nike interested in hiring this person? So Nike, back in 2011, started publishing their supply chain data. And I know it's not something that we all immediately associate with Nike, collective business intelligence, sharing, that sort of thing. And so we were interested in figuring out why. And I think the answer to that is that because they were afraid. And not afraid of the sort of PR issues that, the ones that they were dealing with in the 90s, but, really afraid that, there's not going to be enough water to grow cheap cotton, or there's not going to be enough oil to deal with international shipping, or just not enough resources in general to be able to maintain the kind of lifestyle that allows people to have fully well-equipped sports gear, for example. And so opening up that supply chain data is one of the things that they did to sort of push for that. The idea that if the supply chain data is open and they open it and they push similar competitors to do so, they'll be able to identify weak signals, weak links, and the strong signals and weak links in the supply chain. So it's just an example of some of the things that that sort of projects enables people to do. Improve data accuracy, which is funny because one of the main reasons why people don't actually open data is because they're afraid that it's generally of poor data quality. There's a reason why there's a French postal box here. It was because a few months ago I was so proud and so excited because the post office had finally given me all this data on the location of all of the mailboxes. And I, give it to the first person I give it to are the people over at OpenStreetMap. And he looks at it, doesn't say anything. Next day it comes back, it shows me this huge map full of red arrows everywhere. And he says, well, that shows you where the post office said the mailbox was, and here's where it really is. So it's interesting also going back to what I said about transparency, because this is no longer the usual kind of mentality where we're just thinking about a read society. Like if you're thinking about transparency, we're thinking of a read society. And here it's more kind of like a read plus write society. Data.gouv.fr, which is the French open data portal, has this feature that I really, really like, which I think is emblematic of this. It's a button at the bottom of a data set. And all it allows you to do is to show what data sets are inaccurate. And I think that's really interesting because especially in a country that's known for such heavy critique, it's something that you can do not to complain to your government, not to say, oh, ETELAB is doing such a terrible job, but to say like, hey, this is our data too, and I'd like to show you if there's something that's not working because a lot of people would like to use it. So improve data accuracy. And then open innovation. So I think this is something that we've been hearing a bit more of. This is one story that I quite like. This came out of an initiative that 5x5 designed for the SNCF, which is the French National Railway Company. So they came to us with the issue that their cities aren't scaling. There are more and more people. There aren't more and more trains. And at one point, something's going to have to be done to be able to deal with that enormous traffic flow, especially at rush hour. And so we started opening some of the data. And through a hackathon, met a startup called Snips. At the time, I don't think they were really a startup yet. They're really a group of data scientists that really loved working together on something that was completely different. And they came up with an application that has predictive algorithms that allow users to choose their trains based on what's going to have space and not space, and what's going to have space for them. So Snips has become kind of like the poster child of open data in resource efficiency in France. Rand, who's the founder, went on last year to being like MIT's 35 under 35. And I think the thing that I really want to point out, sort of like to conclude also, is that what's really exciting about this project is not so much the data. And there are very few stories that you hear about the back end. So I worked on the back end of this, like the back end of this project. And by far what's interesting about open data is not the data itself, but the cultural shift, like the immense cultural shift that any organization will have to go to start working in it. This wasn't easy. The press will make it look like it's easy. It'll look like a clear success and everything. Everyone's happy. On a procurement level, it was not easy learning to work with a small startup. On an IP level, it was not easy working with open data and then shared data and then crowdsourced data. And then on a cultural level, I mean, I don't even want to describe to you the face of people, at the executive committee when these guys came in with their hoodies. And they had all these things that you had to work out. And in the end, I think what makes open data really exciting is that now it's shifting this culture. It's making people work together. It's this admission that, hey, there are a lot of things we can't do by ourselves, and it'd be interesting to sort of learn to innovate with others. And the data is really just a starting point. So where that's going to go from there is really kind of like up to the organizations that'll be working with them. So that's it. Thanks. Good. Oh, thanks. Hold on, let me try not to strangle myself.
All right, I'm going to set up the clock. I've got 8 minutes, so it's starting now. Here we go. Oops. L5? No.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's L, actually. Control L.
Perfecto. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Matt Ghee. I think I've got a slide that says that, just in case I forgot. Great. So I wear a few hats. I am a data scientist, which means I'm part researcher, part entrepreneur. I work at the Urban Center for Computation and Data, as well as the Center for Data Science and Public Policy, both housed at the University of Chicago, and helped co-found and run a program called the Eric and Winnie Schmidt Data Science for Social Good Summer Fellowship. I'll talk a little bit about what that means and what that means for opportunities in energy, data, and analytics a little bit later in this presentation. But I want to start out recognizing that anytime someone says they're going to talk about opportunities in big data and analytics, we should all have like the Gartner hype curve in the back of our minds. And I'm guessing we're all about here at this conference, right? So I'm hoping in 8 minutes, I guess 7 minutes and 30 seconds, we can all go down the trough of disillusionment, up the slope of enlightenment, and onto the plateau of productivity, and thinking about what are the opportunities for data and analytics around energy, especially in developing countries. All right, so what can data do? If I press the arrow on this, nothing else appears. Actually, data can do nothing, right? Data by itself is not useful. It's only useful with a little bit of extra work. One important ingredient is actually people. So what can people do? Well, people are really good at identifying needs, right? And then thinking about actions they can take to address those needs. And what people and data can do together is that need informed, once taken with available data, and that data analyzed and cleaned and repackaged in some way, can lead to an insight that actually takes that action and makes it better, makes it smarter, more efficient. It makes it the right action, right? And this process, right, of taking a human need and informing the action to address that need with data is all about what data science is really about. And this is something that me and a number of my colleagues have been doing for a number of years, and we've recognized that there are key obstacles to making this happen and to taking the available data and turning it into valuable insights that can inform action. And one of those is just the lack of talent, the lack of folks that are capable of helping get there. We throw on this term data scientists a lot. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. This is the Venn diagram of data science, thanks to a guy named Drew Conway. It essentially is someone with hacking skills or the ability to program a computer, someone with math and statistical knowledge so they know the right ways of thinking about data, as well as substantive expertise, right? So they know something about the subject matter, so that they can know what are the right questions to ask and the right solutions to really try to surface. And someone right at the intersection, or teams that have that combination of skills, we call data science teams. And it's often said that these folks are unicorns. They're really, really tough to find. So me and a fellow named Raid Ghani, who was the chief scientist of the Obama campaign, a couple of years ago, felt like it was time for us to make a few more of these unicorns. And so we put together this program called the Eric and Winnie Schmidt Data Science for Social Good program that's focused really on training these data scientists, these people with the combination of skills, or helping them round out their skills, to not just drive ad clicks or spy on Americans with the NSA, but actually do good in the world and try to tackle some big problems in energy and education and health, and work with project partners, state, local, national governments on real problems and help them solve them, help them build capacity, and help them build open source tools that will scale. And every year we bring about 50 people together to work on this. There's our benefactor in the middle, Eric Schmidt, from a variety of disciplines, put them together into interdisciplinary teams, and help prototype with national governments or local governments solutions to their particular problems. And the solutions often have to do with things like prediction, knowing something ahead of time, targeting which person or which house or which neighborhood should we focus our efforts first on? Large-scale experimentation, what works and what doesn't, and how can we find that out much more quickly? Lots of different things that data scientists can do in a lot of different areas. We work in health, education, disaster response, but energy is one of the biggest areas, and it's the area that I'm most passionate about and have spent a lot of time doing projects in. And that's something that I want to talk about today. Over the last few years, we've done a lot of projects and worked with a lot of partners in government, in the private sector, and in nonprofits. and in the energy space, and have identified areas where data and analytics can really help drive the market and drive particular types of actions. And then I want to hit on 5 very, very quickly in this presentation. We're going to talk about how data can and analytics can drive private investment, drive individual behavior change, help drive community action, help drive kind of smarter built environment, and lastly, grid stability improvement and integration. And I'm just going to hit on a couple of examples, or one example in each of these areas that I think will help illustrate this. So, driving private investment. One of the areas that is amazingly underinvested is in the US market alone. It's been estimated that there's an opportunity for $230 billion worth of cost-effective investment in energy efficiency. That means it pays for itself, right? So this is like a no-brain investment opportunity, right? And yet this is a woefully underfunded market. There are very, very few private actors in this market right now. And so we went to them and said, well, Wells Fargo, why aren't you investing in this? Or JP Morgan, or a whole bunch of these large investors, and said, what's missing in this market? And they said, we're missing the data. We actually don't know a few things. We don't know where the investment opportunities are. We don't know how well they'll pay off. So whether or not the savings will actually be generated, and how well the individuals who are paying them back are actually going to perform. And so we said, well, let's try to solve that problem. So we opened up a project called the Open Energy Data Project with Environmental Defense Fund and a few other partners, and we tried to tackle each one of those questions one by one. So we started out saying, can we help individuals and companies know where the investment opportunities are for energy efficiency? And we started working strategically with cities like the City of Chicago to develop open data resources like this one that actually has the energy intensity of on a block-by-block basis of all of the housing stock. So if you're a company that does energy efficiency investment or energy efficiency intervention, you can know where you should target your services first, because those are going to be the biggest bang for your buck, essentially. And we are currently working in Hawaii, in California, and a few other places to do this. Second, there's this question around loan performance. There wasn't the available data on whether or not people actually paid back anything associated with energy efficiency. So we went to 5 different states and said, can you give us all of your data that you have on every energy efficiency loan that you've ever given? And they said yes. We said, great, let's analyze it and open it up and create an open data resource that you can go to, that's now part of a larger project called the Investor Confidence Project, that became the first openly available data resource analysis around it on the energy efficiency loan performance, and has actually led to, as far as we know so far, the development of 5 new financial products around energy efficiency lending. Really, really fantastic, enabled by data. Lastly, how do you develop a market around realized savings if there's no measurement for realized savings out there, right? So we worked with a variety of partners and in 5 different states and 10 different utilities to develop something that we're calling the Open Energy Efficiency Meter, which is an entirely open source package that sits on top of utility data that can actually meter in a very, very open methodology that can be used for accounting standards as well as kind of carbon abatement regulations and compliance, how much, and that's my 8 minutes, how much energy savings is actually generated. This is allowing for new business models like pay-for-performance contracting and PACE, et cetera, and is enabled through largely the development of open standards and open source tools. We'll have to wait for another conference to hear the really exciting opportunities for driving individual behavior change, driving community action, and driving sustainable development. So thank you. There we go.
That was a long 8 minutes you had planned there. Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Sonny Massero. I have a background in clean technology and more recently in software, in particular big enterprise software, where I was working for a large American software company and heading up their team in Europe around energy and sustainability software. But while I was there, I realized that there was a lot of opportunities taking place within startups and SMEs providing innovative solutions around how you could use ICT for environmental good. So I left that company last year, and now I spend most of my time working with those small companies, helping to run those businesses, looking at how IT and technology can be used for environmental good. And I also spend time promoting and getting people excited about how technology can be used to address those environmental challenges. What I'm going to talk about today is a report that I did with some funding from Nesta in the UK, looking at the clean web market in the UK. Now, I have the slightly unenviable task of trying to get a 70-page report down into an 8-minute slot. So in this city, this beautiful city of Barcelona, which prides itself on living poco a poco, I think it is, little by little, I'm having to talk at the speed of a Pechacucha, so please bear with me. There is a report that is available, so... Sorry?
Take your time. I think we're pretty good on time.
Okay, good, thank you.
But not very relaxed.
But there is a report, and if anybody would like a copy of it, it's freely available, so please ask me afterwards. So, on the plane over yesterday, I picked up a copy of the Financial Times, and one of the articles by an investor was headlined, "Technology will decide the future oil price." And I thought this was very timely given the topic of this panel today. And essentially what the article was saying was how new technologies are, first of all, reducing the need for oil and for fossil fuel resources, but also that technology companies were becoming the companies that investors were looking to for the future. So you can see the quote there, that only 22 companies have stayed in the FTSE 100 for the past 30 years. So what are the odds that the big oil companies will still be there when we look back over the next 30 years? And what I want to try and do today is show you some examples of where these new technology companies are coming from. I'm not saying I'm picking the ones that are going to be the FTSE 100 or the equivalents around the world, but that's where there's a lot of exciting innovation happening. So the report that I produced essentially has this content, and I haven't got time to go through it all in detail, but I'm going to look at where the data came from, what the companies look like that are clean web companies, what can be done to support those both from a policy and from a commercial point of view. And I'm going to use one practical example of a digital challenge that's going to be taking place in the UK next year. So the data for the study was a combination of existing data, investor data, but also some primary research that we did in terms of surveying clean web companies as well as the organisations that supported them in terms of incubators and government and other agencies. And we looked at a fairly large pool of clean web companies, 250 of them, to identify who the leaders were, both and where there was awareness of these companies. And I also interviewed some of those chief executives and discussed that with the community of clean web people in Europe. And we had a meet-up earlier in the year here in Barcelona, organised by Oriol. So I won't recap what Oriol said about this coming together of the three areas, but what I will say is on these characteristics here in terms of identifying what a clean web company looks like. A number of these are similar to other tech companies, but the two I want to call out are the first and the last. So the first is this ability to enact a change, and enact a change for good in this regard. And the last is around having a measurable impact in terms of environmental good, whether that's resource efficiency or some other benefits, such as reducing air pollution, for instance, or looking at oceans or waste. There's a whole raft of things that could be covered by clean web. And clean web companies also share some characteristics in terms of that are quite different, I find, to traditional clean tech companies. So they are less capital intensive, and they can scale much faster. And that scale is both beneficial from an economic impact, but also from an environmental impact. And it's those two co-benefits that I think are really distinctive for clean web businesses. So what are those environmental priorities? So from the research that we did, I looked at the alignment between those companies and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And usefully for this panel, the number one priority for these companies was climate change and sustainable energy. But you'll see that not far behind was sustainable and resilient cities, and also sustainable agriculture, farming and food. And I would say that transport, I think people in the transport space fitted very much into sustainable and resilient cities. But energy and transport are the two areas where we're seeing a lot of activity, particularly in the UK. But the food sector is one where we're seeing much more fledgling activity, but one that's going to come on very quickly. And obviously the agri-tech market is one that is starting to really take off around the world. So those are the three areas that we focused on. So just to give you an example of a couple of clean web companies that you've probably heard of, I would hope, well, show of hands, how many people have heard of either Zipcar or Nest? Okay, thank you. So Zipcar is a car sharing service which was started back in 2000. They were eventually bought for $500 million by Avis in January 2013. So a reasonable success story, but not compared to Nest, which in only 4 years grew from a startup, from a couple of people that came out of Apple, to a company that was bought by Google for $3.2 billion in January 2014. And Nest produced a smart thermostat for your home as well as a smart smoke alarm. But Google didn't buy them because they designed a sexy thermostat. They designed it because they wanted the data around the occupation of your home, how you use energy, etc. So that's, for me, Nest is as much a data company as it is a product. Now here is a group of companies that you probably don't know. Even in the UK, they're not that well known. But these are the clean web companies in the UK that have attracted the most investment. And they kind of reinforce the point around what are the priorities areas. So these companies on the left, from WEMS round to Immodus, are focused very much on smart energy, both in terms of energy management, but also things like Open Energy, which is focused on using data for demand response services. And then in the middle, you have transport companies. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Citymapper in terms of telling you how to get from A to B by a whole variety of public transport modes, but also Lysander looking at efficient fleet operations, and Masabi looking at ticketless travel. And then on the right, you have companies looking like Amy and Achilles looking at sustainability within the supply chain, and water-focused companies like I2O, who look at using data for optimizing the distribution of water networks. So I'm going to focus it on two particular companies in a little more detail, two that I have a personal interest so can talk about in a bit more detail. But what I'm trying to show with these examples is two examples that are relatively low capital intensity in terms of starting these businesses up and have the ability to scale very quickly. So although they have started in the UK, they could be applied in cities all around the world. So Demand Logic is a company that essentially connects into existing infrastructure. So there's a lot of focus with the Internet of Things and smart energy about installing new sensors or new meters. But we use existing infrastructure to gather data around building performance. So each of these little dots on this graph essentially represent one of these terminal units that you see in the ceiling above you. And within 24 hours, we can connect to a building and start to stream data around how these units are performing. Now that has a benefit in terms of how they're performing poorly in terms of energy, which is what these dots are over here, or also how to maintain them. So one of our clients has a building with 600 of these in their building, and in the past they would have gone around at night time and perhaps maintained 10 of them, and they wouldn't know which ones were performing well or badly. But we can tell them which are the worst performing 10, and they can do it in one night rather than going through 600 units. So, and you can do that for all the different assets in the building. So it's providing transparency on how those buildings are operating in a way that hasn't been done before, and without any sensors or additional meters. The other example is the Curve, which is essentially crowdsourcing data on energy investments. So this is only a pilot stage so far, but essentially what happened was in a month period, we asked companies to share their data on energy investments. So how were they investing in energy efficiency? How were they investing in renewables, etc. And within the month, 65 companies shared £400 million worth of investment data. And from that data, we can then analyze it to see what are the payback periods, what are the payback periods that those organizations are looking for, and what are these projects providing. So each of these colored blocks represents a different category of investment. And then obviously you can drill down into that data and see what those projects were. We've had a commitment now to increase that to 1.2 billion worth of investment. And the aim for the end of next year is to get to 20 billion. And that's interesting because it provides information for those organisations, both public and private sector organisations, to have a real data set around how those projects are performing, either to build their own case to invest in those projects or potentially to identify projects they're not aware of. The other thing it enables you to do, particularly for policy development, is to see real information around how projects are performing rather than historical data. So that's something that we're looking to expand over the coming year, but something, again, that can have application elsewhere around the world. Now, just to finish, I'm not going to go into the recommendations from the report on the Clean Web. They are in the report, but essentially we identified recommendations that were relevant that were very specific to the sector in terms of supporting a cluster of Clean Web organisations. We also identified policy measures that could be done to support that sector, because at the moment, and the reason that I undertook the study was that there's a lot of fragmented activity but no real direction and no real clear policy support. A lot of these companies are falling down either between a focus on clean tech or a focus on web tech, and there needs to be something that understands both of those dimensions. And then there's also the need for investment that recognises the potential for growth in that area. But I'm going to finish just with a very practical example of how we're supporting the clean web sector in the UK. So next year, Bristol, another beautiful city, will be the European Green Capital. And we've launched a Green Capital Digital Challenge that is open for teams around Europe to essentially develop new software that addresses environmental challenges. And I'm just going to finish with this video, which is essentially a trailer of what's coming, hopefully with a bit more volume.
So, let's see. So I'm Jorge Zapico. I'm going to present a little bit about the initiative Green Hackathon. A bit. Okay, now the microphone goes. Is it on? Yeah. So a bit of background. I have an interdisciplinary background. I have a bachelor in computer science, a master in sustainability, and I did actually my PhD on the bizarre subject of hacking for sustainability. I'm working mostly as a researcher. I work at this place called Center for Sustainable Communications, where we are looking at the impact of ICT in sustainability, both direct impact and then how can we use it for sustainability. We are based at KTH. That's the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. Then I have other hat at Linnaeus University, and then I'm also part-time organic vegetable farmer, if anyone is interested about that. That's like my thing. So what I mean about hacking for sustainability, what I've been working most is how can we actually use these tools and these paradigms from ICT for working towards sustainability. I've worked mostly with data, that I think is something that resonates a lot with what we've been talking about in this conference, how we can create data, how can we share data, how can we visualize and communicate this data in meaningful ways, how can we actually remix and create new meaning with it. And then I argue a little bit that one of the main contributions of this, of ICT, is not only as a tool or as some kind of affordances that these tools provide, but it's also a new way of doing things, a new way of innovating that is coming more from the cultural way, from the culture of computer science that I call the hacker way. And in my research, one of the activities that I've been involved in is in organization of events called Green Hackathon. And I think, I'm just following up on the hackathon idea, but it started in 2011 in Stockholm, just mainly because we had like this great space at KTH, which is an old experimental nuclear reactor that they built underneath campus in the middle of the city. They didn't really think so much about the risk then, and now it's become like a performance space where we do different activities in the university. And my colleagues and I, we were working so much with all this interesting data and creative visualization and creating stuff, but that was mostly what we had from our context and so on. So we thought, well, we should actually invite more people to get excited about this data and to see what other ideas and what the other perspective they may have in this open data and open tools that now we have. And this got actually pretty popular, and then it became a whole initiative. And the Green Hackathons don't have so many rules. We have like kind of like three main concepts. First, it has a hands-on approach. So that's kind of like the main thing. You have to actually create something. You have to make something. It's not enough of having a nice idea and doing a nice looking PowerPoint in the end, but you have to actually get your hands on it and produce something. And in that way, you can actually see the challenges, see possibilities, and learn in the process. So we have that code over ideas. And it's quite powerful format, I think, the hackathons, mainly because it's a quite limited period of time. We usually run them for maybe 24 hours, 2 days, 3 days. So you have a deadline that is very close, but you have focused time to work without like meetings and other stuff. So it's an opportunity for researchers or developers that usually we have a quite tight agenda to actually focus and do some practical work. Then it has to be about sustainability, and then it has to be innovative. And in these hackathons, it's not about the creation of startups or anything. It's mostly more like exploring things that maybe we didn't have space in the normal work situations or in the normal company situations. It has to be also a space for making more risky or fun activities. And we had a lot of different participants, all from academia, students, researchers, developers, entrepreneurs, people from the startup community has usually been one of the big groups. But we also had a lot of like interesting people coming from outside, all from like actual farmers, people from companies, journalism, people from policy making. So it has been always a kind of interesting mix. And that's something that we've been trying to work to actually improve on, and having this broadening the participation in the event, and to try to get a nice mix for innovation. So, and after the first one in Stockholm, it started to spread a little bit. So we had a big event in London where there's as you saw before, there's a big community around this topic. Then we had 1 or 2 green hackathons in Athens. We had actually 3 green hackathons in Helsinki, connected to the Open Knowledge Foundation, the European Institute of Technology there. We had 1 in Zurich. We had this year 1 in Fukushima, all connected to energy and a bit also like nuclear power and radiation. We had 1 in Stockholm now this last year again, around food together with supermarkets, and another in Stockholm also about the Green Button Data Initiative. And then the last one was actually in Tokyo for a couple of weeks ago. So it has and these events have been mostly organized by the people from the grassroots, like, oh, this is a good idea. We have some people are interested in building a group, creating community, and organizing these type of events, and having them under the same name and same logo as a way of kind of tying together this small community of practices that usually are not very big in any individual city, but trying to connect all these people with the same interest together. So to sum up, just to say creativity, openness, collaboration, making things. So it's kind of a different way of working and innovation that is quite typical for us coming from the computer culture, that I think is quite valuable to work in other ways for a more broad participation and innovative processes. And I think it can be an important aspect of how we can actually use ICT for sustainability. And that's all for me. Yes.
Yoo-hoo, timer is set. Okay, my name is Roman Zinchenko, and I'm co-founder of Ukrainian energy innovations platform called Green Incubator. What we actually do, we are a platform for connecting energy talents and promoting sustainable innovations. And we are also one of kind of transitioning from classical non-profit to public benefit company, non-profit incubator. And we're focusing on social innovations, entrepreneurship, and education and the media. But before just focusing on what we are doing, I want to ask several questions about the democratizing energy, because I'm coming from the market which is so far from being like an energy democratic and friendly to the consumer than the EU market. So let's share something. Okay, do you remember this logo? Are there people in this room who do not remember this logo? For me, this was like an entryway into the world of the internet. Actually, I used even Netscape Navigator 2. And do you know this man? Well, this man is actually one of those who is responsible for giving us the gateway to the internet, because Mike Andreessen, currently a venture capitalist and well-known visionary in terms of internet technologies, is one of those who actually created the first modern graphic browser, and who created Netscape Navigator and got rich with that, and actually invested Twitter and many other companies. And are there people in this room who don't know this man? So recently, Mark and Mark had a nice conversation. Well, in Silicon Valley, everybody knows each other, especially if you're worth over $1 billion. So they had a nice conversation, and he asked Mark, do you remember Netscape Navigator? And Saktal, no, I don't remember these times. Is this an innovation gap and knowledge problem? Both agree that it's not. Otherwise, Mark Andreessen says, it's amazing that a new generation of people came who do not share all these things, who are trying to create a new. And there's a lot of amazing things that can happen if you're starting something from the scratch. Because banking industry did not step up to create Square. Telcos hasn't created Skype, and transportation companies hasn't created Uber. The new guys who are coming from different perspective are disrupting many of these things. So what's about energy? Well, in energy, everybody says, oh yeah, we have our here. But yes, Elon Musk is probably one of the coolest CEOs and entrepreneurs. But what about disrupting power lines? What about disrupting power stations? What about disrupting power plants? There's a lot of opportunities there. And another great two gentlemen, actually one of them is linked with Mark Zuckerberg, because Peter Thiel once invested in Facebook. They told in their famous Financial Times article that the genuine progress in IT masked the relative stagnation of energy. That's one of the core things. Stagnation of energy means that energy innovations are amazing, but is there a talent explosion in this sector? So, is anybody going to disrupt the power switch? It's not that cool, and that's not that attractive. So, with this idea, we thought, okay, let's make the exciting experience worth repeating and just bringing people to innovating for energy. We started Green Incubator 5 years ago. At that time, we were totally zero startups in Ukraine who were focusing on green things. So we started, okay, let's show how this thing is cool. And we decided to create a project called Energy Camp. The Energy Camp is actually a camp. So this means people camping, cooking food on fire, on solar things and some other things, and discussing with environmentalists, media, and other great people cool and impressive opportunities. And in 2011, it was so cool that even Google Satellite had it on the Google Maps. Yes, unfortunately, it's not there now, but luckily we have screenshots. But then we decided, okay, it's a conference. We had over 10 the conference of this type. Let's switch it into something new. Let's create projects. Let's hack for sustainability. So we turned the page, and on the basis of Energy Camp, we created Tesla Camp, which is actually hacking for sustainable energy, sustainable community, and green innovations. And Energy Geeks Wanted is like our important motto. And this is the important attraction point for young people which could never imagine they would be hacking and disrupting the power switch. So since then, we did five energy hackathons, three indoors and two outdoors, and Tesla Camp is the most famous. And you can do a lot of things there. You can like print Ukrainian symbolics there in 3D printer. You can have like a cool T-shirts if you're a volunteer. There's young people from all over Ukraine, some coming internationally. And it's like actually doing things, be software, hardware, but it's actually meeting new founders, meeting new partners, and doing things. And we also have this Ukraine's most energy efficient automobile, which is driving 500 kilometers per on 1 liter of petrol. And amazing speakers from different industries like security, and the view is also cool. There's the city of Kyiv on the other bank of this river. And well, this gentleman is probably Ukraine's youngest millionaire. He made his fortune in IT. And Tesla Coil is playing their Ukrainian national anthem. Drones are flying. People are eating on the open air. But the most important, they are creating. This is the picture of the team that last year got the Hupin Prize, the first prize. So we are like trying to be lean. So they have a prize around $500. Impressive, isn't it? So, but since then, they used that money and the drive, and for some reason, then Tech.eu published 10 exciting smart energy startups from across Europe. The Eco-is-Me team, which was born in Tesla Camp, is in the list of these startups. And when IDC, Investor Day Central Eastern Europe, was held in Kyiv recently, they won the second prize and got a little bit better prize of 10K euros. And recently, Kyiv Post published a nice article about them. Ukraine programmers rate $100,000 from Deutsche Telekom. So they are starting, and we are starting with them. We are in the conservative country where we need to help people to understand that it's time for redefining utilities, to think about programmable grids, smart home as a service, to think about energy marketplace and many other things. But also, we are getting some traction and trying to attract more young people into hacking for sustainable energy and hacking the urban problem, because, well, sometimes there are really unexpected solutions for long existing problems. So when we are speaking about energy data and about big data, we are dreaming about energy API, because energy APIs can help people connect with the utilities and maybe use the energy data the way Foursquare is using geodata. Now, we are just not understanding all the opportunities. We are thinking about virtual power plants and many other things you know here better than we know in Ukraine. But, well, another thing is one of our core speakers, Andrei Kolodyuk. We also need the democratic approach which was brought by the internet in the energy. Bringing this democratic approach, we call it desacralizing the energy, democratizing the energy, and moving things forward. So we are moving forward with this thing, and we are further collaborating with universities. We are trying to build physical incubator because we're still a virtual organization. And we see that the capital is not so even important on the starting page. On the starting page, the most important thing is giving the young creators, the young makers, the right signal. And you probably, Sonny definitely knows the gentleman on the next slide. You probably know the Meet Jacobson, who is one of Austin clean tech industry founders. And that's exactly the thing we are trying to communicate to the young makers. Energy geeks are sexy. Creating new things is cool. And disrupting the old industry is really cool. So that's why we are trying to do. Well, we started without business plan, but just with the idea. Innovate for energy. Well, and we are 5 years afloat. So we are lucky. Thank you. I'm not sure we have time for video. We have time?
It's like 1 minute video.
Well, it's around three minutes. So
It's up to you.
okay, if we have time for video, I have like a video from Tesla Camp last year. Are you okay?
Would you like to see it?
Okay. No, not you. It's not.
Is this one?
Just make it full screen.
Привіт, я з Луганська.
Київ,
Тернопіль, Дубно, Миколаїв,
Львів,
Well, it's in Ukrainian, but it still gives the atmosphere.
Владивосток.
Я на Tesla Camp.
Я на Tesla Camp. Tesla Camp was great.
Ми на Tesla Camp.
Мы находимся на прекрасном, красивом лугу. Наверное, это мой самый большой пикник в моей жизни, который я организовала.
Чесно, спочатку було страшно, тому що нам
This guy
сказали,
is
що
saying
тут
we were
ми
scared in the
поїдемо
beginning
в поле,
because
тут не
we
буде
were
ні
going
електрики,
to
нічого.
camp.
Я не знав, як ми
No
можемо прожити
infrastructure, and
ці
they
3
have
дні.
internet, they have electricity, they have all the services and other things.
3 дні, використовуючи лише відновлювані джерела енергії.
So we survived 3 days just on the
Tesla Camp
renewables.
– це просто унікальна подія, якій нема аналогів взагалі в Україні. Тут зібрались люди зовсім різні – дизайнери,
This
електротехніки,
is about like connecting
програмісти,
designers, technologists,
Я приїхала
programmers,
сюди на одну годину,
hackers, makers.
і за цей час моє життя повністю змінилося. Це була моя мрія протязі попереднього 1 місяця.
Дітки
We
дуже
also had the
кмітливі,
program for kids,
дуже
like it's called
винахідливі,
Energy Kids for involving younger
сподобалось,
generation.
і мені, в свою чергу, сподобалось працювати з ним.
And of course, how can you do this without electric vehicles? DIY electric vehicles from this guy.
И руководителям, что то, что доступно саудейщику в тесноте его гаража, со скудным его бюджетом, тем более доступно любому украинскому предприятию.
Завдяки відвідування Tesla Camp ми зможемо раціонально використовувати електроенергію.
They're saying about the ability to use electricity wisely. It's actually the CEO of our largest solar developer,
Хороші люди, хороші емоції,
the older guy.
гарна їжа, приготовлена в казані, велика для всіх.
Food.
Все супер.
He's enjoying food here.
Мы придумали идею,
These are
как
guys
научить
who
людей
got Deutsche
экономить
Telekom investment recently.
электричество, воду и остальные бытовые ресурсы. И делать это не просто как-то, а делать это интересно.
Організаторам хочу побажати, щоб вони були такі самі драйвові, такі самі енергійні і щоб вони кожного року продовжували цей чудовий захід.
Okay, keep on moving.
Мені
дуже сподобалось.
He's my brother, another
Попри те, що
co-founder.
було купа роботи,
So he's really cool.
атмосфера дуже допомагала, бо
He
вона
enjoyed the
заряджала
place.
всіх
I will
енергії.
probably cut off the video now, but you can watch it on our website at drinkubator.info.
Люди знайшли нових колег, люди
See
знайшли
me
нових
here.
партнерів, люди знайшли девелоперів, програмістів, технологів, дизайнерів
I don't know how to do
і
it.
видали на гора пару прикольних проєктів, отримали призи. Я безмежно вдячний всім тим партнерам, всім тим друзям, які допомагали створювати цю подію. Шалено вдячний за атмосферу, за натхнення аудиторії, шалено вдячний тим, хто творили, тим, хто
I'm thanking
пробували,
everybody
хто шукали.
for
Шалено
cool
вдячний
atmosphere
тим,
and
хто
cool time.
підтримали. Це Tesla Camp.
And actually, this one was supported by US government, and this year we are running full on commercial sponsorship, and probably will get profitable someday. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, maybe just to have a bit of a conversation before we go to the lunch break, and then before opening the floor to any question, I would like to ask to the panelists today, maybe what is the role of policy making in the activities that you've been involved with? We heard that the Tesla Cam approach. We heard about the role of transparency and open data. We heard also about open data for energy, and then enabling companies in the UK on the clean web sector, and then also the formats of hackathons. I would like to hear a bit different opinions of the role of policy making, maybe from two perspectives. What is needed? Policy making, in many cases, is not a requirement, but it can be an enabler, or it can create obstacles. So what do you think is needed, or in which ways you saw that policy making is supporting the activities that you're involved with? Mm-hmm. And I open the floor to any of you.
I can start.
Kat,
This
for
is
instance.
on. Maybe I'd like to tell you about the Chief Data Officer of France. I think it's an interesting story because it's new. He's only been the Chief Data Officer for about a month or so. We're actually very excited because the announcement was made from our office. We're in the startup space. And so his name is Henri Verdier. Back when his original job was actually as the director of the open data task force of the Prime Minister, and recently he became Chief Data Officer. So just to show kind of like what does that mean exactly, what does that shift mean? As director of the Open Data Task Force, it's called EtaLab, a few years ago, he basically had a small team of about 5-6 people, really like underfunded, not a lot to do in terms of open data. If he wanted any data open, he really had to knock on people's doors and really ask them to give it to him. It was very difficult doing experimentations on an interministerial level, but it was a very strong cause and a very attractive cause, and so he was able to rally quite a bit of support. But it was really a lot of kind of like bootstrapping inside the government. And today, Henri now has very special powers that don't necessarily come with very special responsibilities, which is very interesting. He now has the power to requisition data from any of the ministries. He also has the ability to run experiments based on that data, and we're not even talking about just open data, but any forms of data as well, sort of prototype solutions, whether or not this will be implemented or not. And that shift, just the creation of that position and giving him and a lot of the people that have been supporting this inside the government for so long, that power and that space and that clout, has sent a really strong signal in France, really strong signal to the startup ecosystem as well, to say that, okay, now you have a government that's starting to understand you, maybe you can start working together. And those relationships have become very strong over the past few years.
I'll just echo that. Earlier, someone mentioned green button data. So this actually was started by when the current equivalent of the Chief Data Officer for the entire United States was actually working at DOE. And a fellow named Nick Sinai hatched the idea and really pushed it forward, and the rest of DOE kind of made it happen. But that type of standard setting has been something that policy makers and policy-making entities can do that enables markets to really flourish. But one of the challenges is even if you get standard setting from the top, you need local implementation. So every successful project that we've seen has required both high-level policy support as well as local capacity and implementation. So one of the biggest bottlenecks on green button and implementation has actually been not that there hasn't been support nationally, but local utilities have really struggled to implement it.
Can you elaborate a bit on how are these two levels coordinated, or whose responsibility to coordinate this link?
Well, I think part of the challenge is there's actually, I don't think it falls under anyone's responsibility to coordinate the link between the two. But where there has been some success is that you've seen in the United States, for example, you have entities regulatory entities called public utilities commissions that regulate the private utilities and sometimes publicly held utilities. And what they've done in some of the more progressive states is that they've taken it upon themselves to act as that coordinating body. So they've said to the utility, you will implement green button, or you will abide by these following open data criteria. And you've seen this in California, you've seen this in New York, you've seen this in Illinois. Really important policy positions around data that have enabled markets to flourish in those states have really come out of the Public Utility Commission.
There is also one more important aspect. We very often in different markets have to deal with like so-called professional conservatism. No, this is not going to work. This is not going to happen. We are professionals. You don't know what you're doing. And policy changes sometimes are needed to hack this approach, this stagnant conservatism in terms of implementing energy innovations. So sometimes, for example, in our case, sometimes there is a ways on the policy making, on the legislative makers to push the changes that will just force this renewal. And it's really important sometimes to be rather active and aggressive in pushing innovative legislation.
Sonny, maybe you have some recommendations.
Sure, I'll try and, yeah, there are a few recommendations in the report. I'll try and keep it short in the interest of lunch. I mean, for me, for policymakers, I find supporting this kind of initiative a bit of a no-brainer because of the co-benefits, because of the fact that it's not an expensive sector to stimulate and support because it's software-based. It's not the same as creating new hardware or new clean technology. But there is a benefit both from an economic growth perspective and a rapid economic growth, but also the environmental benefits, which are also costing governments money. So for me, you're saving twice by investing in this sector. But at the moment, those companies and startups are falling down between support programs for clean technology and support for clean web, and not necessarily bringing those two worlds together. Sorry, web technology and clean tech as the two worlds. And the companies are falling down between those gaps because those support programs are not recognizing those co-benefits and how you support the growth of an organization to deliver environmental good and economic growth when it's very possible. You know, Nest is the most prime example, but there are a number of others coming through. But I mean, in the UK, we've got innovation programs and grant funding for these kind of initiatives. We're starting to see it come through the European Horizon 2020 program. We saw the first Clean Web grant funding program at the end of last year. So it is starting to happen, but let's see if it can happen faster.
Great. Well, just to close, I wonder if Jorge, did you have an encounter with policymakers when running these green hackathons?
Yeah, we collaborate with the city of Stockholm, for instance. And I mean, I must say that I just mostly have positive responses. I'm mostly just surprised that these things that have been so marginal until now we have such a big support. So I'm just kind of overwhelmed that they have reached this level of involvement. So I'm just mostly just happy about this, how much support it is and understanding of how these things that were obscure now we can actually talk, and there's an understanding of what we talk about when we talk about openness, open data, and so on. So, like, keep the good work.
We want to see more out there. I wonder if there is any question from the audience before we go for lunch. Yes, at the end.
it's not a question, but it's a comment or an answer to the question you said, what did U.S. government do for green button? You talked about regulation, that's one of the ways they did, but another way they really put a lot of emphasis on is Nick Sinai and the White House really encouraged and highlighted the success.
Yeah.
So regulating is one, but a lot of times the other side of the story, which is highlighting the success, encouraging them, and White House did a great job on it. So
that's a really good point. There were the White House actually sponsored. I guess it was DOE, but White House helped. There was actually a sequence of hackathons specifically around green button data. Yeah, data challenges or something. Data Palooza. That's right. Yeah.
Hi. Just follow up on the comment you mentioned, the lack of capacity at the local level implementing. Can you elaborate a little bit? What kind of capacity is lacking, and what's the most, how to say, the obstacles you feel?
Sure. I could chime in on that, but I want to make sure if someone else wants to. We've noticed capacity a lack of capacity in a couple of areas. So one is actual just they know what they need to do. They just don't have the ability to get there. An example of this is actually the map that I showed you for the city of Chicago, the aggregations of all the energy data. So there were two challenges with generating that. One was that the city really wanted to support it, wanted to make that happen, but they were legally barred from receiving the raw energy data from the utility. So they couldn't, they just couldn't do it. So it was not a lack of will, it was a lack of ability. In addition to that, they didn't have, at the time, their local kind of data team didn't have the bandwidth to be able to do the very challenging analysis of taking individual level data, scrubbing it, getting rid of all the outliers, and then doing the hard work of thinking hard about how you anonymize it so that no individual's data is exposed. And those two things, both kind of the legal ability as well as the technical capacity, has been, I think, a repeated theme that I've seen in cities and countries over and over again. And I think the policy framework can be, policymakers can help on the legal side. On the technical side, it's going to come a lot out of greater partnerships with companies, with universities that can come and augment local resources.
Just to add to that, I do think there is there are technologists that don't necessarily come from the environmental space who have this latent sense that they want to do something in this area but don't necessarily have enough domain knowledge to define what that is. Yeah. And that's where I think things like challenges can be really useful in defining those market needs and making it very clear. But that one of the things that we're doing next year in Bristol is focusing on the technology companies, because there's a big cluster already there, and trying to then direct them in the direction of these are the things that need addressing, and that shouldn't be missed out as an opportunity as well.
I think for us, like one challenge that we definitely see is at the procurement level. I mean, people like to talk about supporting startups, and it's usually very, it starts off as usually very fluffy, very event-oriented, and we like to talk, in France we like to make fun of the sort of like a kitten and teddy bear culture that some people might have towards startups, where they're very happy to support them when they're tiny, but once they start getting some momentum and get larger, like all of a sudden nobody pays attention to them anymore. So procurement is definitely a big challenge, especially for startups in, let's say, the energy sector that are working B2B, because they just simply can't get hired. They can't get hired, because of procurement, but also because I think there's like little awareness regarding what a prototyping contract is. People are, I think, are more used to working with much larger companies with a much clearer contract where the end result is very clear. But sometimes when you're working with startups and they're experimenting, and sometimes the product isn't clear just yet, there has to be the kind of openness to understanding that this is going to be a process, and the outcome is not exactly going to be something that you'll know on day one.
Do you mind if I share a quick anecdote on that?
Yeah, sure.
Just because it happened last week with a very large military organization that I won't mention. This was actually a conversation between a startup who had a very innovative idea. that was going to help this organization save millions of dollars and the organization themselves. They said, we can't currently, it would be very, very hard for us to buy your product because we'd have to go out this open RFP, and it would take about 3 years for us to eventually be able to purchase it. What we can do is do a demonstration project because that follows under a different area. So I think what it takes is someone inside those organizations thinking creatively enough about around the bureaucracy they have to deal with in partnership with the companies to be able to demonstrate the technologies and really bring them to market.
Right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Any last question? Well, then, with that, I would like to thank all the panelists. It was a great pleasure to share the stage with you and have to continue conversation.